All right. So for assumptions for a one-way ANOVA, in general, when we talk about assumptions, we're talking about requirements to conduct a test. So to ensure that the test is valid to conduct, you should consider assumptions. I've mentioned this in other videos, but there are a lot of people who feel that they're assumptions for a reason. You should just assume they're true. For me, for class, I'll ask you specifically about assumptions. And so I think they're good to check. And it's relatively straightforward to do. So first of all, for a one-way ANOVA, assumptions that we have that we can check here. So first of all, there's assumptions like you have to have a continuous variable for your dependent variable, things like that. But for beyond the type of variables, we have the assumption of the homogeneity of variance, which we had for an independent samples t-test, where we're looking to see across those three different groups is the variation in scores for self-efficacy is approximately the same. So it's this idea of like, are we comparing groups that are similar enough to compare? And if not, you can make an adjustment. You can use an alternative test. So to check that, I'm going to go to assumption checks and I'm going to click this homogeneity test. And what I'm looking for is I'm looking to see if my p-value is less than 0.05. If the p-value is less than 0.05, you can say that or you should say that you reject the homogeneity of variances, which means that you do not have homogeneous groups or similar groups. And so then in that case, you could do a different test instead. And just to show you on this, in the independent samples t-test, you can just click inside of the independent samples to add like the Welch's t-test. For this, you actually need to go back to ANOVA and go to one-way ANOVA, and then you can conduct this Welch's test right here. So that is one way that you can check your assumptions. And then if you violate this homogeneity of variance, you can conduct a Welch's ANOVA instead. So the next option, the next thing we should check is this normality test. And the normality test for ANOVA, they're typically robust in terms of normality, meaning that they're strong against normality violations. So you don't have to worry about it as much as with like a t-test. In this case, we can see that our p-value is not less than 0.05, so we can assume normality. However, it is important that you don't have extreme outliers. So you could always do a box plot to evaluate for outliers and make a decision from that point. So that's how you would check those assumptions for the one-way ANOVA. You can also do a QQ plot, which talks about normality. If you're a QQ plot person instead of a Shapiro-Wilk test for normality up here, you can see that it follows approximately along this line, and that's what we're looking for. In the next video, I'm going to talk about how to interpret the results for the one-way ANOVA, and then I'll talk about how to write about them in APA.